Hi friends, it's Amy Astrab with Ad Astra Stamping. I just wanted to hop on here and show you another card with the fabulous Hand-Penned Petals stamp set and dies. So you can get these as a bundle together and save 10%. I would highly recommend doing that. They work great together. Either are great options. If you use them as a standalone, they mix well with other dies. They mix well with other stamp sets. So great addition to your craft supplies. I'm going to turn this camera down now and go ahead and get started with this card. All right, so the card that we are going to be making today is this card here. I am using the rich Razzleberry as my background on my card base. So I went ahead and I used the scalloped die to go ahead and cut one edge. I just lined the scallops up to the very edge of the paper, just enough to trim that off to give me that scalloped look. And as you can pull it up to the camera, you can see there are some stitching lines there. I want to emboss with my embossing folder right up to that line. So that is what I'm going to do now. I am using the beautiful new embossing folder out of the annual catalog. It is called Pretty Flowers, and that's what I'm going to be using today. On the first card, I used it as a debossed. I want to emboss in this one. And so I am going to insert this into my embossing folder, and I am going to just leave that scalloped edge out of the embossing folder, and I'm going to go ahead and run it through my machine just like this. Okay, so I have run this through. And I've got that lovely imprinted image that is going right up to where the stitching is near my scalloped edge. So this is the same size as the card front. So I will be trimming this down to reveal just a little bit of that card base. So I'm going to trim 1/8 of an inch off of each of 3 sides because we've already cut some off the scalloped edge. So bear with me while I trim this down. Okay, so I've got that all trimmed and ready to go. It is ready to adhere to my card base. I'm going to lay it to the side. And now I'm going to do some stamping. So I have already got 2 of the stamps loaded into my Stamparatus. I'm going to go ahead and put my cardstock in here. I'm going to be die cutting both of these out. So I figured I would just go ahead and stamp them both at the same time. I am using the Stamparatus because I want to make sure that I get a nice dark black image for both of these. Also got my sentiment in there, so it's kind of in the way of my magnet, so I'm going to pull that out. Give that a nice firm press. It's a good impression, but I'm going to ink it up once more so that I get it nice and dark. And that is what I love about the Stamparatus. It gives you that option to stamp a second time and get it exactly where it was at before. Now I am pretty happy with that. So I'm going to call that good, but if I wanted to, I could definitely go a third time with that. So I'm going to go ahead and set the Stamparatus aside. We'll come back to it in a little bit. And I am going to go ahead and color this image real quick before I die cut it. Now today I am using the Blackberry Bliss. My cardstock is rich Razzleberry. They coordinate together very well. but I want the flower to be just a little darker. I'm going to start with the lighter color, and I'm going to throw some scratch paper underneath because this does tend to bleed through a bit. Now I'm starting with the lighter Blackberry Bliss Stampin' Blend marker. These are alcohol-based markers, and they blend beautifully. And I'm going to go ahead and color both of these flowers real quick. Now I probably don't need to be quite as careful because I am going to be die cutting this out. But that's just my nature, is to be careful with what I'm doing. So that being said, I am going to go back now with the darker Blackberry Bliss, and I'm going to add some accents to these flowers. Flowers tend to be a little darker towards the centers. So I am going to go ahead and add this darker Blackberry Bliss around the center. And I'm also going to do the same with this other flower. And I'm not going to take the dark color all the way up to the top of each petal. I'm going to leave it a little lighter towards the edges. Okay. Now I am just going to go ahead and blend that back in a little bit with the lighter one. Okay. And then I am using Granny Apple Green for my leaves and my stems. So I'm going to start again with the lighter of the two. And now I'm just going to add some accents with the darker Granny Apple Green. And I like to usually try to hit the lines on these leaves, kind of making the centers just a little darker. Just using those as a guide. And then I usually like to try to add a little highlighted area where the stems kind of meet up with other branches and right at the base of the flower. And I'm just going to blend that in by going back over it with the lighter color again. The alcohol within these markers, when you go back over, just helps them to bleed together and blend without giving you those harsh lines that regular markers would give you. So now I'm happy with my coloring. I am going to go ahead and use this die cut to cut my flower out. And there I have my flower die cut out, ready to go on my card. I am going to take a piece of white cardstock and I am going to cut a scalloped panel for that to lay on. And for that, I am going to use the Scalloped Contours Dies. This is another great bundle. I'm going to be using this scalloped die. It's going to coordinate very well with my scalloped edge. So I'm going to run this through my die cut machine. Okay, and I have pre-scored my card base. I'm just going to go ahead and give that a quick fold. And use my bone folder to go ahead and get a nice crisp, clean fold line. And I am ready to assemble my card. So this is going to center right on the card base, like so. I'm going to have the scalloped edges here where the card opens. So we'll go ahead and adhere that down now. As you'll notice, this is the debossed side. That is the side I chose for card number 1. This time I chose to emboss it so that there is more of the flower popping up off of the panel instead of debossing down into the panel. Either way is a beautiful, beautiful look. I'm absolutely enthralled with this embossing folder. And there we've got that down. We're going to go ahead and pop the flower right on to this panel. I want my leaf hanging over the edge, the left edge, and I'm going to go ahead and take my leaf hanging over the edge, the left edge, and I'm going to go ahead and take the petals almost up to the stitching at the top. So the petals are at the stitching at the top. This flower should just be almost touching the stitching on this side as well as that leaf. That's how I want to adhere this. I've got my edges where they belong. I've got that flower, the edges of the petal, got that flower, the edges of the petal touching the top. I'm sticking all of that down nice and tight. And now I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to my card base. And I'm going to go roughly about center with that. Now I need a strip of white cardstock. And I want this to be about as wide as the card, just shy of. So I'm going to actually put some stitching on this end, so we'll have just a hair over the stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and make this the same as the card base, and I'm going to cut that about 3/4 of an inch. Now, once I've got that cut to 3/4 of an inch wide, I'm going to go back with this scalloped die cut, and I am going to go ahead and line the stitching up right on the edge. So I want to get the stitching lines. I don't want the scallop. So I'm going to put my die right up to the not overlapping those scallops so that I get just the stitching. Okay, so here we go. First attempt, it got a little crooked. So I used a piece of washi tape to hold it in there straight so I could get a nice, clean, straight impression. So I'm going to peel that washi tape off carefully to preserve my piece. Put the die away. And now we are going to stamp our sentiment onto our piece of cardstock. Get this down here so you can see it. Now I want to make sure I get this good and straight. So I'm going to get my magnets in here. I am using the grid on here to make sure that I've got it in here straight to start with. I'm going to use both magnets. And I need to make sure that I'm getting this right side up. It's got a little ink on it, so let me get it clean before we start. Now, this is my good end. So I am going to need to stamp upside down for you, right side up for me. So I've got the anything is possible. I'm going to get it nice and straight as I can, straight as possible, straight as I can. I'm going to go ahead and ink that up. Making sure that stays in place. Get a nice, dark, crisp impression. We'll put the stamparatus away. Now, you can go ahead and line the stitching up with that so it looks like it's sewn on there. We'll adhere this on with a couple of glue dots underneath. You could also use glue. These glue dots are really fabulous for sticking things down really good and tight. So I'm going to go ahead and get that on there. And we'll need one on the other end. Now I'll be trimming some of this off. So I don't want to get it too far to the edge. I want to be sure that I'm lining this stitching up so it's even. I want this stitching on that bottom piece to show. I'm going to stick that down, and I'm going to use my snips to just go ahead and trim this even with the panel below. And then I am just going to go ahead and tuck one more glue dot underneath. Now on my original card, I actually wrapped it around that panel before I glued it down. Either way is a fine option. Make sure that glue dot's tucked up underneath there good. Don't want any adhesive sticking out. Now the only thing that is left to do is go ahead and add some embellishments. And on this card I added some of the basic Rhinestone Jewels. I put a large one right in the center of this flower. I added a medium one here in this corner, and I added a small one right over here. And there we have our card. Ready to stamp inside or write the note of your choosing and get it in the mail. So I hope you've enjoyed this little video tutorial on how to use the hand-penned petals, dies, and stamps. I love using this bundle. It's great. It's I ordered about 5 or 6 bundles at one time. And so I'm just having a ball going through them one at a time, playing with them, experimenting with them, using elements of one with another. And so I would highly encourage you to do that. When you order at least $150 in Stampin' Up! Products in one single order, you qualify as a party or the host of a party, and that entitles you to Stampin' Rewards. So you earn 10% in free merchandise with an order of $150 in product. That's before stamps, before tax and shipping. So if that is something that you're interested in doing, ordering a large order at one time, I would love to walk you through that and help you with that and answer any questions you might have. So feel free to contact me about your Stampin' Up! Order. If you don't already have a demonstrator, I would love to be yours. You can visit me at astrostamping.stampinup.net, or when you go onto the Stampin' Up! Website, you can just select Amy Astrab as your demonstrator and shop with me that way. So in the meantime, until I hear from you, happy stamping, and look for more of my informative videos right here on YouTube. Thanks, and bye-bye.